could go a long way in determining whether Israel seeks a military solution to the perceived Iran threat, a very real threat for Israelis. Let's get more on the situation from former Israeli ambassador to the United Nations, Dori Gold, who joins us live from Jerusalem. Ambassador, thanks for joining us.
My pleasure.
We thought we'd ask you some questions. You're not currently in the Netanyahu government, but obviously are very connected to it and might be able to provide some candor and insight into what Israeli leadership is thinking. Secretary Clinton, speaking about the Iran situation today, said this about diplomacy in action.
There is still time and space to pursue the objectives that we seek through diplomacy. We want to see a peaceful resolution of the international community's concerns, but the time for diplomacy is not infinite, and all options remain on the table to prevent Iran from acquiring a nuclear weapon.
Is the administration, Ambassador, the Obama administration, doing enough in the eyes of Israeli leadership when it comes to Iran?
Well, we have some hard dates coming up that I think are in the mind of every Israeli who's aware of them. On December 19th, 2011, Secretary of Defense Leon Panetta told Scott Paley in 60 Minutes, a CBS News show, that he believed that Iran could have an atomic bomb within 1 year, maybe even less if they have secret enrichment plants. Now that means we don't have a lot of time. We know from the past, when the European Union in the last decade negotiated with the Iranians tried to do two things. They wanted to fend off international pressures, divide the coalition, diplomatic coalition against them, and they managed to put off Security Council resolutions for a number of years. The second thing they wanted to do was complete their program, build nuclear plants like they did in Isfahan during that negotiation. So we assume that the Iranians will do exactly the same thing this time around. And the only problem is they're not at the beginning of their program like they were in 2003 or 2005. They're in the final stages of their program. And if December of 2012 is the time when the Secretary of Defense evaluated that they will have an atomic bomb, we don't have much time.
So what is your reaction, Ambassador, to statements like the one made by the chairman of the Joint Chiefs here in the U.S. That Iranian leadership, and particularly President Ahmadinejad, may be a rational actor? And you mentioned 60 Minutes, the former head of Mossad intelligence in Israel, told 60 Minutes that he believed Iran was rational in the sense of Middle East rational, and that there was still time. How do you react to those statements?
Well, I don't know what a Middle Eastern sense of rational is, but I think what's clear about Iran is they have completely irrational goals. They're related to the notion of the return of the hidden imam, the 12th imam. Now, they might try and obtain those goals in a rational way, but the actual goal itself, to create global chaos, to build up a nuclear capacity so they could become the hegemonial power in the Middle East, and not just be satisfied with the borders they have, those are irrational goals that they may try and obtain rationally.
I guess the question is, in the minds of Israeli leadership, if you can, to give some insight to the American people about what their perception of U.S. Reaction is so far. What has happened so far? Is it enough? Are they pressing on the pedal enough?
Well, I think one of the problems we have is there's just too much talk. You know, President Obama, when he spoke at AIPAC at the beginning of March, said something I think was very correct. He said that there's too much loose talk about war. But the problem is, within weeks, you read in the New York Times all kinds of officials who are talking to reporters, giving scenarios of what might happen if there's a conflict in the Middle East. I think right now, everybody has to not speak so much. You know, I appeared on Israeli radio about a month ago, and I said, you guys have to learn an expression in English from the U.S. Navy. Loose lips sink ships. So I taught the Israeli audience the expression. The same is true here. There's just too much leaking, too much information. We don't know where it's coming from, but it erodes confidence. And we're allies, and we have to deal with Iran. We can't have this kind of back and forth in the American press.
Last thing, Ambassador, there was a now infamous statement by President Obama in an open mic moment. Take a listen to it. I want to get your reaction.
Of course, it's my last election for you. Yeah. After my election, I have more flexibility. I transmit this information to Vladimir.
How was that received in Israel?
Well, I think the general view in the world community, but also in Israel, is that policies can change when you go into a second term. But we're hoping that our strategic interests with the United States are of such depth that political calculations of that sort will not alter fundamentally our relationship. We have to prevent Iran from getting nuclear weapons, because if Iran obtains a nuclear capability at the end of 2012, we're in a different world. The price of oil shoots up. The countries of the Middle East begin to feel extremely endangered, and the threats of armed conflict and terrorism surge.
Ambassador Gold, thank you very much for your time. Early morning, Thursday morning. Thanks for coming in.
My pleasure.